Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 19th of January, 2026. It's just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Delighted to be here. Now, we understand that today is Blue Monday. And can you explain what that is exactly, Ben?
It's all just so awful and depressing because Christmas is gone, New Year's gone, you haven't been paid in weeks, the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
It's still dark in the evenings.
It's still dark. It is getting lighter, though, I've noticed.
This is true. So we just thought we'd recognise Blue Monday, but we're going to say for the UK Column News team today, we're not in a blue mood. We are absolutely going to get stuck into what's happening in the world, why we all need to know about it, and why, when we know what's happening, we feel better, and that allows us to do things. So don't wallow and be depressed. We're going to try and take you through some of the mayhem happening in the world and lead you into a better place. So there we are. Now, we're going to be having a look at who's running the government. We're going to be looking at initially with a little bit of public pushback, and one of the places that we can see this is on social media. But we're going to have a deeper dive into the change in UK politics, because UK's political democratic constitutional system is being hollowed out from the inside as we speak. We're going to be looking at the global public-private partnership. Ben will be digging into Mr. Rockefeller and his very wealthy team that can influence not just national politics, but politics on a global scale. We're going to be looking at one of the big organisations that's got tremendous clout on the world political stage, and that's the Trilateral Commission. And we're going to think about Greenland. We're going to think about Ukraine in a little bit of a different way, to just start to get people breaking out of the straitjacket mould of course, the BBC's propaganda reporting. And lastly, we're going to end on a bit of AI. So when are we going to start, Ben?
Reasons to be cheerful, Brian.
Thank you.
I know Christmas is gone, New Year's over, but the World Economic Forum starts today in Davos. The self-proclaimed elites of international banking, industry and politics ascend to the Swiss canton of Davos for the 26th edition of the World Economic Forum. I'm excited. Brian is definitely excited, I can tell. But who's most excited of all is Keir Starmer.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, and it's closed, and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
Well, he's so full of it, Ben, isn't it? But he's telling the nation, your government no longer matters. Westminster doesn't matter. I'm only going to do business on an international platform. And of course, in that international platform today, in 2026, we got complete mayhem with possible, amongst other things, possible breakdown of NATO. So out of the frying pan into the fire, I think.
Yes, absolutely. He loves Davos. Starmer loves Davos. He hates Westminster. I can understand why. It can't be a particularly comfortable place for him at the moment. He's not getting a lot of good press from anybody. And he's not confirmed to go to Davos, although I'm pretty sure he will be going, because there are calls for the need to hammer out a Ukraine peace deal. So apparently he will be attending. It is assumed. But I would just say it's a good job we do actually have some real red-blooded patriots in this country ready to stand up for the British people against these nefarious international powers. Who do I mean? Of course, it's Nigel Farage. He's been very vocal about Davos over the years. Just this little quote here. What's happened to us over the course of the last 50 years is we've decided nation states don't matter. We've decided national democracy doesn't matter because we can decide all of this in ski resorts in Switzerland. Isn't it wonderful?
Well, it would be wonderful if Mr. Farage was to get stuck in and start to do something about it by talking about this issue full time. But of course, his problem is he's locked into Trump, and Trump now seems to be out of control, even against the background of the rules-based international order. So I think there's a lot that we should be demanding from Nigel Farage if he is really on the game of cleaning up politics from these very powerful global influencers.
Yes, he has. Well, he's spoken about it a lot, right? So, you've got this quote here. He's also described the World Economic Forum as a smug and conspiratorial meeting of enemies of the nation states. He accused Keir Starmer in 2023 of being a full-on globalist hanging out with his mates at the World Economic Forum. But, shock horror, Nigel's going. So despite all of that, he's actually going to attend the Davos conference that he derided as a jaunt for globalists.
To appear. He's actually appearing at the conference.
Yes, he's going. Yeah, he's going to the conference. I don't know if he's going to be on stage, but he's certainly going to be there.
And to be there, you've got to be invited. And that means the club that's in control of the world's politicians has now got its sights on Nigel Farage. And of course, he'd be the perfect man to win the election, get into post, but he too would then be in bed with the people who really hold the power. That's how it seems to me.
Yeah. It's almost as if we can't believe anything he says.
True. We'll talk about that a bit more in UK Column Extra today.
Yes. Okay. Well, luckily, there is some good news amongst all of this, which is that people seem to be getting wise to the scam. Now, I've been following the World Economic Forum Facebook page over the past couple of weeks, and obviously it's just started today, so there's nothing for us to report on particularly. We'll talk about this a lot more next week. But I've really rather enjoyed the public response to every single post on the Facebook page of the World Economic Forum. Just a few examples from this post. The meeting of the Bond villains and global overlords, another socialist gathering. Imagine being one psychopath actually attending this and looking at yourself in the mirror afterwards. Traitors of humanity, calling themselves leaders while no one elected them. Installed, not elected. The people will take the power back.
Yes, brilliant.
Absolutely indicative of every single comment. There is no support for this organisation at all on social media. And I love that final point, that people will take the power back, which is ultimately the thing that they're all particularly concerned about. Let's just listen to this final little clip from Neri Woods at the World Economic Forum in, I believe it was 2022.
The good news is the elite across the world trust each other more and more. So we can come together and design and do beautiful things together. The bad news is that in every single country they were polling, the majority of people trusted that elite less. So we can lead, but if people aren't following, we're not going to get to where we want to go.
Well, a classic happiness clip there, because she's telling you these people are really worried because ordinary people are onto them. Now, if that's more on the global platform, let's have a look at Defence HQ, which is the Ministry of Defence here in UK, its very own X or Twitter page. Let's have a look at this appalling clip on the UK and Ukraine. I'll talk through some of it, but I wanted you to just hear the music. So for those of you just listening in, basically a very smooth little video clip about the partnership with Ukraine. You could see very clean troops in trenches. You could see industry at work producing military products, basically. And the whole thing's set to this very soothing music. You'll hear more of that type of music in another report in today's UK column news. But essentially, UK can't even get its own defence sorted out, and yet we are now locked in to 100 years with Ukraine. Now, as Ben has just demonstrated, the public in UK are onto that. So if we just pop this one up on screen, this is a little video clip of the comments, and about 380, deep state regime change. We've got committed to defending the most corrupt regime in the EU. Mod, I believe you and Healy have lost the plot effectively, and so it goes on. Once we get down to the bottom, we're going to be seeing some of the images: deport terror, import terror, so a cynical response to this. And the amount of money, £22 billion that's gone into corrupt regime. If you go through these comments, it's obvious that people see through the pure propaganda. And if we just pop this horrible picture up on screen, we've got Healy, the man, here, and he's sitting next to the Defence Minister, Umerov from Ukraine, but it's the expression on Healy's face. Are these two in some form of very special relationship? Because it's definitely a look of love. But let's just think about this, because basically we've got a corrupted national flag, the UK's flag being corrupted in the background. And I couldn't resist a little bit of naughtiness here. Darling, you look so manly with that number one cut and a beard. What is going on here? This is nothing to do with sorting out the defence of the UK, which is described as hollowed out, and that's quite right, pouring money into Ukraine, and a love affair going on in front of the public. But all the comments from people coming in are absolutely calling it out. Now, what's happening in UK? If you think our country is being run from Westminster, then think again. A number of people have said, with regard to analysis, both myself and Ben, we sort of get where you're going, but we can't really ground it. What are you talking about? Well, what we're talking about is the fact that Westminster effectively has been taken over by very powerful organisations and funders. And we're just going to give you a demonstration today to show why this is true and how it needs to be dealt with if this country is going to survive. So let's start off with the Institute for Government. And the headline I'm going to bring up here is in the small print on the photograph of the how do we describe these people? They will look particularly wealthy and happy with their glasses of champagne and fruit juice. But basically, it's talking about thought leadership and engagement with policymakers. But of course, none of these people have actually been elected. And if we go deeper into the Institute of Government, back in 2024, they were talking about power with purpose, the final report of the Commission on the centre of government, the centre of government being effectively the heart of government, which the Institute for Government says is not working. Let's have a look at this video clip where they themselves explain what they've been up to.
As you walk down Whitehall, you pass the Cabinet Office, Downing Street, the Treasury. It's from these departments, these offices, that the centre of British government operates. It's from here that the Prime Minister directs the nation.
The UK is facing huge challenges: stagnant economic growth, huge technological change, crumbling infrastructure, failing public services, an ageing population, climate change, and global instability. We need a centre that can enable the UK to meet these challenges. Successive Prime Ministers have discovered that problems at the centre have inhibited their ability to deliver on their priorities. The centre of government isn't fit to meet the challenges that face the UK in the 21st century.
So that's why a year ago, the Institute for Government and I set up the Commission on the Centre to examine the problems at the very centre of British government and to make recommendations. Over the last year, we have spoken to those who've worked at the heart of Downing Street, for the Cabinet Office, as well as the Treasury, and we've been looking at why the centre is not working as well as it needs to.
The centre isn't strategic, with governments usually failing to define their priorities. They get into micromanagement and sometimes develop a bunker mentality. And it's unbalanced, with a powerful Treasury often left to fill the strategic vacuum created by an underpowered number 10 and a Cabinet Office with an ever-growing list of responsibilities. This can and must be rectified. So, having identified the problems, the Commission has made 7 key proposals to solve them. The government should agree its priorities at the start of a parliament and announce them as part of a modernised King's Speech to set a clear direction for departments and other parts of government to follow. The Prime Minister should appoint an executive cabinet committee made up of just a few key ministers to help them make the most important strategic decisions. The Prime Minister should appoint a senior First Secretary of State with responsibility for delivering the government's priorities and ministerial responsibility for the civil service, freeing up the Prime Minister to retain a more strategic, long-term view. The Cabinet Office and number 10 should be restructured into a department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet and a separate department for the civil service to strengthen support for the Prime Minister and more effectively coordinate and reform the civil service. There should be a new statute for the civil service and civil service board to hold its leadership accountable for delivery. The roles of Cabinet Secretary, accountable to the Prime Minister, and Head of the Civil Service, accountable to the First Secretary, should be filled separately to give the civil service the leadership it deserves. The priorities for government should be fully reflected in a new shared strategy, budget and performance management process, owned collectively at the centre of government, to better coordinate, budget for and deliver long-term and cross-cutting priorities.
We cannot have the centre continuing to fail to give the nation the leadership and the Prime Minister the support that they need.
By this time next year, we will have had a general election. Whoever wins and forms the next government should implement our reforms without delay.
So a lot of information in that little video clip, very important for the UK column, for the UK public to see it, and for the UK column to dive into what these people are actually talking about. But very calmly, this lady's talking to camera and saying our plans, our policies should be implemented. And the trouble with the country at the moment, we often hear broken Britain. It has been broken. It hasn't broken by accident. She names previous prime ministers, but suggests that really they couldn't do their job. Was it not the case that those prime ministers were so useless that they could not do the job in the country, including reorganising their own systems to allow them to do the job?
Right.
To me, this is quite incredible.
And this idea that all you need to do is centralise power, and then that will allow you to fix everything and make everything happen as you want it to happen.
Right.
This doesn't work.
Right. And we have an organisation, the Institute of Government, which has simply appointed itself in the position of changing the government in the way it thinks it should be changed. Right. So if we have a little look at the Institute itself, of course, a key bit is to have a look at some of the small text. So it says our work covers comment, analysis and a variety of topics from Parliament, the Constitution and civil service to public services and public finances. This organisation is buried at the heart of government. It goes on to say, since before the 2010 election, we've also undertaken preparation for government work with opposition parties in the run-up to the elections. So they're declaring that they are manipulating the parties themselves in order to help them get in power. And we can be very sure that once those manipulated parties are in power, it's going to be the Institute of Government that's going to be controlling them. But relax, all their work is confidential. Of course it is. this, because if the public really knew what this organisation was doing, there would be a huge outcry, and quite rightly. Now, remember that the Institute of Government is just one organisation doing this type of work in and around government, and this is why the lid needs to come off the complete deliberate hollowing out of government by some very powerful people. Now, the Institute of Government's got another layer, the Institute for Government Academy. Apparently, it helps those outside government to engage with it. Think about what that means. It means that people who are not elected to be in government are being given specially privileged positions in order to interfere with the workings of government itself. We could call it lobbying, or we could call it a desperate attempt to get big contracts, or it could be changing government policy so that their policies helps the political and corporate agenda of these think tanks which are in and around government. So essentially, we're losing control of government because the idea that elected politicians are running the country is clearly nonsense. Now, who runs the show? Well, of course, the funders are really running the show. And what we see, if we have a look at more of the small print, is that the Institute is saying that most of the funding each year comes from the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, set up by David Sainsbury to realise his charitable objectives, not the objectives of the country, but his private charitable objectives. And the Institute of Government itself was set up by David Sainsbury with the purpose of making government more effective, presumably in his image, to give greater powers to supermarkets for even bigger profits in the country, or indeed to expand overseas. Ukraine, I don't know, but it's a possibility.
It's capital and the city generally. So Gatsby, one of the big partnerships that they established back in 2015, I think it was with the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, which is Linda Rothschild's vehicle for exactly the same thing we're talking about.
Yeah. So if we have Lord Sainsbury's working with these organisations, the Institute of Government, Gatsby, in order to change government itself, we should remember, as reported by the Mirror here, that basically Lord Sainsbury is the man who is funding the Labour Party itself. So this is a very interesting article. And I flagged up here that Dorset Eye, no idea who this is, but quite rightly, this member of the public is pointing out the hypocrisy that Lord Sainsbury is pumping money into government and then working in and outside government to change government policy the way he wants. What do we describe this as? Some people would say it was corrupt. Whether it's corrupt or not, the UK column can't say, but certainly a lot of questions here about vested interests. Now, what sort of policies are they following? Well, if we have a little look at the Sainsbury's Wellcome Trust Centre, this is one part of the work that they're involved in, and I've entitled it From Politics to Brains to Behaviour. Let's have a look at the video.
I am Tom Mersick-Flogel, and I'm the director of the Sainsbury Wellcome Centre for Neural Circuits and Behaviour. The mission of Sainsbury Wellcome Centre is to understand how complex behaviour arises from biological matter. How does the brain generate perception? How does the brain generate plans? How does it set goals? How does it make decisions? Different labs at the SWC are looking at these component processes and either describing them mathematically or indeed doing experiments to see where those computations are taking place in the brain.
My name is Anne Duan. I am a group leader at Sainsbury Wellcome Centre. My lab focuses on studying the neural circuit mechanism underlying flexible decision-making, understanding how we shift decision preferences as a function of different internal states, who we are, what our history is, what we're thinking right now, in a world that could be uncertain or dynamically changing, or sometimes even in a multi-agent social context.
encourage all of the UK column viewers to look at the show notes to find that little video clip. Really horrifying what these people are into as a subject matter, but also when you look at them and you say, what are their real intentions? Is some of the techniques to change the way that people think and behave, is that going to be brought back through Lord Sainsbury into the Institute of Government in order to change the way that politicians and civil servants behave, to make them adhere to the sorts of policies that he and his support team want? That seems to be the reality. But the idea that we have our elections, elect MPs, those MPs are then creating the policies in the best interest of this country, complete nonsense. And I've got to say here, and of course, Nigel Farage is aware of some, not all, because he's not well informed on many aspects of what we're talking about. But if he were to understand what's really happening, he should be in a prime place to actually expose what is happening. Now, the government is worried that people are beginning to see what is under the stone. And of course, the most fertile minds are young people. So we shouldn't be surprised that the BBC is reporting that more than 60 Labour MPs are urging the Prime Minister to ban social media for under 16s. And of course, this follows on from what's happened in Australia. But what we can be sure about is that the government, it will only be government-approved news which will be considered suitable for youngsters. We don't want intelligent young teenagers working out for themselves the propaganda and the lies that are coming through mainstream politics in UK. So if that's a dive into one organisation which is there manipulating at the heart of government, over to you, Ben, for the really big players.
Thanks, Brian. That was fascinating. I've been looking at Gatsby and the Institute for Government for a little while, but I hadn't seen that film. And what's really interesting to me is that after the general election that she referenced, I'm guessing that was from 23 or early 24.
Correct.
After the election, Georgia Gould went into the Cabinet Office and was immediately talking about the transformation of the centre. So using exactly the same terminology,
right,
and also all of that brain science stuff that they're investing in. I mean, that's sort of weapons grade propaganda stuff. This is the mind space, right, that they're talking about.
Indeed, the Cabinet Office document from 2010 mind space, where the government boasted it could change the way people think and behave. And the public, the people, would not know this had happened. Very, very dangerous, malicious application of political psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just happening in the UK, it's happening internationally, globally, in fact, actually. And I'm going to kick things off in this section with this quote from David Rockefeller. Some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterising my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it.
That's the statement. These people don't have any shame because they're immensely wealthy and powerful. The only thing that matters is what they want. And he is proud of it. I'm sure in his head he's very proud of himself.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's from his own autobiography, by the way. That's published in his memoirs, called Memoirs, came out in 2002. People called us conspiracy theorists. There's no need. He's literally just described exactly what we're talking about. He's admitted to it. And ultimately, for me, that amounts to a global coup d'etat, the destruction of the nation-state system and the replacement with a single integrated global political and economic structure, as described by David Rockefeller. Now, David Rockefeller is dead. He died a few years ago, but his vision and his work lives on through organisations such as Democracy Next. Tagline, another democratic future is possible. We talked about this organisation a lot over the past couple of years. It is backed by the Rockefeller Foundation, hence the link. Also the One Project, Open Society Foundations, which is George Soros's vehicle for investing in this kind of activity, and the National Endowment for Democracy, which Patrick spoke about on Friday, actually, which is essentially a CIA front for funding regime change operations in countries around the world. They're interested in democracy. It's run by this lady. This is Claudia Chalice. She's the founder and chief executive. I like to call her Twinkle Toes, the baby-faced assassin. Look at that face.
No, butter wouldn't melt on
exactly.
That yeah.
Okay. So these are the people they send, to tear down your social, economic, political structures and replace them with something that works for the international supposed elites. Right? This is the type of people that we're dealing with. She's also she's got a lot of connections, Claudia Chalice. She's also a senior advisor to MIT, where artificial intelligence was essentially founded. A lot of the early R&D work around artificial intelligence was done at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. The guy that runs MIT, Mark Gorenberg, recently described AI as being used to optimize for a better world. That's what they see AI as being for, to optimize for a better world as defined by these think tanks and the supposedly philanthropic powers that fund them. Ultimately, she's also in at the UN. She's part of the UN Democracy Fund, one of a tiny handful of outside investors that are ploughing money into these kinds of democratic transformation processes all around the world. And the UN itself was actually built on land. The headquarters in New York was built on land that was donated by the Rockefeller family. It's intimately linked into every single component part of global governance via the United Nations, the Rockefeller family and the foundation is. Chalice, back to Claudia, she's apparently dead against populism. So she wrote this book, The Populist Signal, Why Politics and Democracy Need to Change. This came out in 2015, published by Policy Network, where she was working at the time. Policy Network was set up by Peter Mandelson, right? So she went there for her early training. I think it tells you quite a bit about Chalice and her background and the types of people she likes hanging around with. And this was about pushing back against these emerging ideas of skepticism and distrust of the establishment. And the book contends that populism is a warning signal that we need to revisit our approaches to governance and representation. So apparently populism is you just need more government, that will fix everything, essentially what she's saying. Now, I don't think she really understands what populism means, because if you define populism, according to the guy that coined the term, it's the idea that society is separated into two groups at odds with one another, the pure people and the corrupt elite. And I think that she actually is part of the corrupt elite, whether she realises it or not, and she might not. I think she's part of the corrupt elite. So I don't think she really understands what populism is, even though she's built a large part of her career around it. And I also don't think she really understands what democracy is, interestingly, predicated on the idea of one man, one vote. Let's have a little listen to this clip.
There's been a notion that legitimacy has been equated to how many numbers and how many people are participating based on the lens through which we tend to view it through our existing electoral and representative institutions of what we think about as democracy today. But there's no reason to think that the only thing from which legitimacy stems from is numbers. So
yeah. But democracy is not about numbers. It's about a process that she controls, that she's happy with, and the outcome and the decision that she likes.
But it is a signal it is a signal again, Ben, that they are worried that there is pushback. Wherever they see pushback labelled as populism, they're worried about this. So Blue Monday today, lots of good news when you really pay attention to what these people are talking about, the progress of their plans, because they are running behind the clock.
Absolutely, they are. And they're really pushing ahead at the moment, and they're trying to scale, right? So last week they introduced this new paper. So they ran a launch live stream. We'll provide a link. You can go and watch it and hear what they have to say. It was about this thing here, Scaling Democratic Innovations, a new paper they've delivered, which in its opening statement says citizens' assemblies, these are the democratic innovations they're talking about, right? Sortition, citizens' assemblies, staged managed pseudo-democratic democratic processes that are designed to deliver an outcome do not spread themselves. Behind every successful scaling story sits a constellation of organizations doing the essential, often invisible work of building capacity, establishing networks, advocating with decision makers and ensuring quality standards. And they call these scaling catalysts. So these are these micro organizations in countries around the world who are working to the same agenda as Democracy Next and all of the vested interests that we've described, pulling the strings from behind the scenes in order to bring these new pseudo-democratic systems into place and to get rid of the existing political structures ultimately, right? And they see this playing out in a number of different ways. These are the 5 frontiers that they see that need to be moved towards. So introducing deliberative technologies. So this is AI essentially. They want the whole thing to run on AI rails so that it can be controlled centrally. And in fact, people like Peter Thiel have spoken a lot recently about the idea that democracy could actually just be replaced with technology, something we'll come back to again shortly. They want to focus on education, so building deliberative muscles from a young age, getting kids into this and believing that they have a right to be part of these processes.
So they're desperate to get youngsters into their system, or at the same time we're going to pass laws to make sure that youngsters don't get any information which is clear of their system, i.e. social media reports, UK column news, other channels which are putting out really good quality information. We don't want youngsters watching any of that. We're going to censor them till they're 16, because by the time they're 16, these people believe that they will have captured the minds of youngsters. That's the way I see it, Ben.
Yeah. Because they're in the classrooms and they're already doing this, by the way. This is not sort of tentative stuff they might want to do in the future. It's already happening. It's happening in this country. And Brian just mentioned legislation. They want to build legal frameworks, encoding participation as a civic service right. It's similar to jury duty, essentially. And if you get selected, you have to do it. So you don't have any choice about the matter. They want to build bigger communities of people scaling this stuff across all the nations of the earth, ultimately. And they want to build a public communication brackets propaganda program in order to get people to buy into this whole agenda ultimately. This is heavily linked into things like the Fabian Society. So we can see here Chalice talking at the launch of the Bloomberg LSE event back in October, I think it was, the London School of Economics, which was founded by the Fabian Society. This event was obviously attended by Sadiq Khan, supposedly Mayor of London, but actually he probably prefers just being called the president of the C40 cities, and also a former executive committee member at the Fabian Society. Complete
internationalist. He's not interested in a national UK with all the different types of people that live in UK at the moment. This is an internationalist brain. He's thinking on a global scale,
Absolutely.
Not helping people in his locality.
Absolutely. No, he detests the nation state, I believe, I would say, Khan. And he's building this into the physical infrastructure of City Hall, for example. So this is the new City Hall building that he's moved into. So they had that thing down by Tower Bridge. They're only in it for 20 years. And now he's up sticks and he's gone up down to the Docklands. And they're literally architected and designed this place to enable these democratic or these innovative democratic processes. Deliberation will bring in 30 people and we'll talk to them and we'll pretend that tells us something about what should be put forward in terms of policy for the whole population, right? So this is actually playing out as we speak. And there's demands for more of it across the civil service. So this is from Civil Service World a couple of years ago now, but the idea that citizens' assemblies are being demanded by the public, and you can see the banner on the left-hand side there, Citizen Assemblies Now, that's an Extinction Rebellion banner. Who funds Extinction Rebellion? George Soros does. So the demand is coming from the person who's promoting the policy. See how that works?
Well, yes, because I think that the Lord Sainsbury's got an element of this.
I would tend to agree.
Being done on a national scale instead of an international scale, but it's the same principle.
It's exactly the same thing. And then if we can just get that back up quickly, Sue Gray, former Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer, she wasn't in position for that long, basically saying that Labour will introduce citizens' assemblies, and actually the big push is to replace the House of Lords with a House of Citizens.
Right.
So this is total constitutional restructuring around these new democratic processes.
Correct. And for the audience, think about, so it's Labour saying that they would introduce citizens' assembly, but we've already seen that the Institute of Government is working in, through and around government and advising the political parties before they are elected as to how they should work and what the policy is. So are we looking at Labour Party policy? I'm going to suggest not, just my personal opinion. We are highly likely to be seeing the Institute of Government policy, and that policy has been created by immensely wealthy and powerful people who've never been near the democratic system. When you know where to look, this is all in plain sight. And of course, what we need is more people to talk about it, including the likes of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, who at the moment are buried in the weeds of rubber boats without telling the population of the UK what they really need to know.
Absolutely. And one of the main places that this is being trialled and will ultimately be scaled from is from the cultural sector. And we've got a clip here of a citizens' assembly which took place at the Museum of Birmingham. I believe it was last year.
It's nice to have the same what's happening in the city.
I'm hoping we can make a positive change for Birmingham.
It's nice to be a part of something like this and feel like we're being listened to.
We can make a little bit of a contribution to the solution. It's important we get that right.
I talk to other museum directors about what we're doing, and I can see a look in their eye. Really? I wouldn't do that in a million years. You're Birmingham residents, this is your museum, your collection.
You decide on the displays.
I would say the short answer is we do decide.
The sessions just followed a nice structure where it just starts from the people, ground up, builds up to what we want from the museums.
The regular people are going to be the people that come here. So it's really important that they have a space to voice things that they don't like, and probably more importantly, things that they do like and want to see more of, so that we can tailor the experience and then just get more people through the doors.
We think that the museums deserve to be busier and better, and this is one of our first attempts at doing that. So we sent out invitations to 5,000 people, and through a process called sortition, we ended up selecting 25 people who represent different demographics of the city to really genuinely find out what people think about museums.
So 5,000 people out of it's the second city, 3 million population, 5,000 people invited, 25 selected. And this gives you a sense of how undemocratic these innovative democratic processes are. And what you're seeing there, particularly in the cultural sector, is the enforcement of a multicultural perspective and the rewriting of the history of Birmingham in this instance, but you can see how that can then be expanded out across the whole of the country as well. It's not Birmingham as it was, it's Birmingham as the international elites want it to be in the future, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right. And we talked a bit about some of the institutional powers behind this. I'm going to chuck a few more names and logos on the left-hand side as well. Eric Schmidt, former chief executive of Google, on the steering committee of the Bilderberg meeting, set up something called the International Strategy Forum, of which Claudia Chalice is a fellow. She's been a fellow there for 12 months. That is run by this guy, Jared Cohen, who is, amongst other things, the president of Global Affairs and partner at Goldman Sachs. And in fact, let's just have a bit more of a closer look at Jared Cohen, because he's a very, very interesting fellow. I said he's at Goldman Sachs. He's also an adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's a member of the Trilateral Commission, which Brian's going to talk again about in a moment. And then before that, he was the founder and chief executive of something called Jigsaw at Google, which was its intelligence operation, which was working on regime change operations in places like Syria and Ukraine back in 2014. He was before that at the US State Department as an advisor to Condoleezza Rice and also Hillary Clinton. So that's Republican and Democrat administrations he was advising. So he's a pure play uniparty type guy. And he was also a Rhodes Scholar as well, which is basically a finishing school for the global establishment. And these are the people who are running what I would say is a global coup d'etat.
I think that's absolutely reasonable to say that. Certainly it is not the UK government which is running UK. Keir Starmer told the truth. He's working for Davos. He's not interested in the people in this country. Now, the Trilateral Commission mentioned, let's just bring them up on screen. If you don't know about this organisation, you need to know about it. This is a recent report that from the Commission itself. They created a task force on global capitalism in transition. So what they're telling you is that they are not happy with the existing system of capitalism. We don't want free trade between countries where it's the creation of wealth and it's the it's the entrepreneurship of people in countries that creates the business, creates the export. No, this is all controlled by immensely powerful people, very wealthy, through the international banking system, which of course controls all the finance and the equity. They are going to change capitalism into their model. And if you get into the details of this, you will find that you are right back with the type of agenda that Ben has just been talking about. So if we just have a little look at this one of many images and comments coming up on social media because people are so upset about what Trump has declared he wants to do with Greenland. So the key point here is a question: is Trump, as the President of the United States, acting as an individual, or is he working for other people? Now, I'm going to say, if you look at the deep strategic policy of the Trilateral Commission, the world is to be forced into three blocks. The Americas, that includes North and South America, the European system, which also includes Africa, and Asia. Those are the three key blocks. And if you look at the politics that Trump is unleashing at the moment, you could say he's creating a mayhem which is making the formation of these big centralized blocks even easier. So just a thought, but have a look at it. This Greenland has produced a backlash. Let's just have a look at this video clip here. The interesting thing is the soft music. Do you remember Defence HQ at the beginning of UK column news today? We had this very soft music as a background to what could be violence and military operation. Let's have a look at this clip.
There are no pressing security threats to Greenland, but we share real concern about Arctic security going forward. As the climate changes, as the sea ice retreats, as shipping routes change, there are legitimate reasons for us to explore ways to invest better in Arctic security broadly, both in the American Arctic and in our NATO partners and allies. As an original NATO ally, Denmark has been a tremendous partner for us in security. And that relationship is rooted in deeply shared values, values of democracy, of self-determination, and of respect for territorial integrity. We seek to find a way forward through this moment that reinforces the 225-year-old partnership and alliance between the people of the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States.
So interesting words from Senator Coons there. Seems to me he's using very, very conciliatory language, almost a back step away from the intensely hard line from Trump. And what's produced that change? Well, if we have a look at the next video clip, part of it is the fact that ordinary people are making it perfectly clear they're not happy. Let's have a look at this protest in Greenland itself. Okay, we seem to have a little bit of a problem on that clip. We'll try and get that into UK Column Extra, but essentially that was showing the number of people demonstrating in Greenland and Denmark against Trump's intention to take over Greenland itself. Okay, well, if we move on, We have to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been supporting UK Column. We are funded by our members and people who donate to us. We can only do what we do with your financial support. So if you're one of the members or donators, or you're making purchases through our shop, a huge thank you to you. If you're watching from UK or overseas and you're not yet a member, then do go to the website and press that magic click here button, highlighted by our famous yellow arrow, to join in the UK Column, become a monthly member, or make an annual donation, or join up with a lifetime membership, because it's your financial support that keeps us going. Now, aside from all the news and information on the UK Column website, of course, tonight at 7 p.m, we've got germ warfare going out, plumbing, not vaccines, and decreased mortality. And I'm sure that's going to be another interesting episode. And here we've got Silk and Steel podcast going out tonight at 9 p.m. And we're having a look at inside Venezuela after Maduro's kidnapping. So absolutely on the button talks, and I would encourage people to go and have a look at that. Now, let's put Ukraine in a little bit of context. With the idea that the President of the United States is not just a man who can act on his own. He can only do what he does with the support of these very powerful international organizations. So turbulence is always a good thing. Got some very interesting effects happening in the studio around me at the moment, but let's go through this. And this one was pointed out to me that the United States, through a presidential decree, has just decided that it's going to withdraw from a lot of international organizations, conventions and treaties that are, quote, contrary to the interests of the United States. Now, what is so interesting about this very comprehensive list, we can't show it all in today's news, but it demonstrates the number of non-government organizations and overseas organizations, including the UN, that are dragging nation states into the weeds of a globalist agenda. Now, Trump has said he's withdrawing, and one of the ones he's withdrawing from here is the Science and Technology Center in Ukraine. Now, what is the significance of this? Well, for the Russians, this would be very significant because they accuse this organization of having worked with the biolabs as an offensive operation against Russia. I'm going to say that's not proven, but it's a very strong Russian claim. If we look at this organization's own report, here's the annual report 2024. If you're worried about the look of the dog, this is a dog trained to sniff out mines and explosives, so a working dog, which is why it's got eye protection on there. But in this report, of course, we can very quickly go and see who the funding is from. The two big players were the United States and the European Union, but also there you can see Canada at 6% and the United Kingdom at 1.6% and 4.1% from the Kingdom of Norway. Now, who in UK is putting in money? Well, it's the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So we haven't sorted out energy security in UK, if we even believe in that term. But this organisation pumping money into Ukraine, and the Americans now saying, well, we're pulling out of this organisation. And this is an organisation that has basically swallowed nearly $500 million since its inception, which I think is going back to about 1993, if I remember correctly. So Trump absolutely pulling out of this organization, clearly now slowing down military supplies to Ukraine. Is this because he knows that America is not capable of dealing with Russia and China? And at the moment, the fear factor with the Americans is China. And so he's shifting target, not because of his own policy or just the fact that we've got very powerful global corporate people whispering in his ear, as reported in UK Column News on Friday. We've also got organisations like the Trilateral Commission clearly influencing the American administration in order to say what it should and should not be doing in the world. Now, in the same manner as America under the Trilateral, we've got the European Union system, where instead of the nation states, we're grouping up to produce one cohesive European superstate. We should remember this phrase. I've cheated slightly here. It should be Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals, but in fact, many casual commentators have changed this to the European Union from the Atlantic to the Urals. Now, the significance of the map on screen is that, of course, the Urals are well to the east of Western Russia, and therefore Europe to say it is going to run Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals means that Russia must be fragmented and absorbed into the EU. Let's just have a look at this very informal but informative clip talking about this aspect.
Have you ever wondered where Europe ends and Asia begins and vice versa? It looks like one continuous landmass with no clear physical break between the two continents. The boundary starts in the Arctic Ocean, runs south along the crest of the Ural Mountains, and then follows the Ural River to the Caspian Sea. West of this line are countries considered European, while east of it are countries considered Asian. This divide exists even though Russia is one continuous landmass spanning both continents.
Okay, so a little bit of information there. Let's have a look at the next clip where we've got Macron and Putin talking about this very subject of a Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals.
Je pense que notre relation a beaucoup d'avenir. Je pense qu'elle structure l'idée que j'ai de l'Europe et elle épouse une forme d'histoire française. Je pense que l'Europe va en effet de l'Atlantique à l'Oural.
Monsieur le Président, c'est peut-être la traduction qui était pas bonne. En fait, l'Europe, c'est de Lisbonne à Vladivostok. Oui, tu m'as coupé la parole, c'est moi qui voulais le dire. Je pensais commencer par cette remarque, en fait. Mais bon, tant pis.
So for the non-French speakers, essentially what was happening, Macron was talking about an EU from the Atlantic to the Urals, and Putin cut back in and said, well, basically, he was talking about an EU from Lisbon through to Vladivostok ultimately, and this is one of the key things, is that the European power project has always been about taking land as far as the Urals, and that means that either Russia does as it's told and joins the EU, or else it's got to be subjugated and broken apart in order to be forced into the European Union. Now, why do I say this? Well, this is one report. This is from Russia in Global Affairs back in 2007. And we've got an article here on Yuri Dubinin, Ambassador Extraordinary of the Russian Federation, and in 1994-1999 he was Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation. There's a little bit of text here and comment. Let's have a look at it. So initially he said he was an assistant to the head of the ministry's first European department. I specialised mainly in French affairs. So while I was on my way to Kuznetsov's office, I thought we would discuss them, and we really did. Apparently, Khrushchev just called. I heard as soon as I entered the office. He's enraged, quote, over Charles de Gaulle's statement about a Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals. He has given instructions to urgently clear it up with the French, what their president meant. This is Khrushchev saying that he wants it cleared up. To clear it up with the French, what their president meant, expressing ideas like that. What if he is hatching plans to break up the Soviet Union? So the assignment is urgent. Take a seat. and we will prepare the text of a letter of inquiry. It should be noted that the slogan of building a Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals had been launched by de Gaulle long before September 1962. Moreover, de Gaulle had created it and repeated it so often that these words became a catchword, a kind of credo for French policy in Europe, and even more than in Europe. In Europe, and even more than in Europe, as de Gaulle put emphasis on them even during his stay in the United States. Of course, Soviet diplomats and statesmen had heard those words on many occasions without giving much thought, though, to what they could mean or how they could be interpreted. Now, the key point that I'm making here is that for the Russians at that time, they saw the statement as an implied or actual threat to the cohesiveness of the Soviet Union. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, since that time, we've witnessed the breakup of the Soviet Union. And now in 2022 onwards, 24 onwards, we've got many people calling for the breakup of the Russian Federation in order to save Ukraine, but also in order to allow not only the EU but NATO to expand eastwards. Is this just the policy coming out of the European Union? I would suggest not, because this again fully meets the trilateral policy. So we're not dealing in a self-functioning European Union. We're also dealing in a European Union under the control of trilateral Davos power in order to get this globalist agenda in place. So just take us on from there, Ben, into the subject of AI, because, of course, AI is seen as one of the key weapons by the globalist system in order to subjugate not only nation states, but also the individual in the street.
Indeed, it is. And you just thrown an additional talking point for me into the mix there, Brian, which I'll come back to in a minute. But for now, let's just have a look at on this day of Davos, the first day of Davos World Economic Forum 2026. Let's have a listen to a senior partner from EY, one of the World Economic Forum strategic partners, my old boss, in fact, Rahul Gautam, talking about what he calls multimodal AI and its use in the media industry.
I'll throw an example in as well and stay on the positive train here, because I do think at the end of the day, this will all be a net gain for the industry. We were doing real work with a client who had a eureka moment on the revenue side of what could AI do for our business and for the IP we have invested in building. And the exam question was, can we build a multimodal model that will take a piece of content that we've already developed and turn it into a different piece of IP and content that we can then go and use for other commercial purposes. So to make it very specific, we built an animated film. The target for this film is 3 or 4 major Western-oriented countries. The exam question is, would this play in other markets? As we all know, animation is super expensive, so the idea of localizing that content in advance of knowing whether it was going to work, too high a hill to climb, so we're going to build it for our traditional audiences. Well, in this case, let's load the film into a multimodal model and have it create 7 graphic novels of the exact same IP, but now in a graphic novel format. Let's then load it into another model that localizes that content into other geographies and languages, which is a far easier task than doing that with animated content. So now all of a sudden, off of a base piece of IP that I developed with my traditional workflows, I've developed entirely new pieces of IP that I can both generate revenue with in the market. I can use to test the efficacy of my IP in other markets and help to build the case to maybe create this film or localize it with a much higher degree of confidence that it's going to be successful. And if it works, maybe now I'm thinking about doing TV series off of it. Maybe I'm looking at entirely different forms of shoulder content and IP. And I'm fundamentally now rewiring the economics of the business, because the revenue upside and the value of a base piece of IP is fundamentally different than it would have been pre-IP.
Rahul, I've got to tell you, I'm really sorry to say that our chat box was not impressed with your presentation there. But this is how these people speak, by the way, and I'm fluent in that stuff. I know exactly what he was talking about. But essentially, the point of that was they're working with a media business, which may or may not be Disney, right? I think it might be, but he doesn't actually say, and he's not allowed to say, in fact, because of client confidentiality. They've created a cartoon, a piece of intellectual property, IP. It's what he mentioned that term a few times. And that's been designed to target 3 or 4 Western countries. And they want to sell this in other countries that aren't Western countries. And instead of repurposing that cartoon, recreating it, rescripting it, maybe thinking of doing something completely different, because that would be difficult and expensive and would need people and all that kind of stuff. You'd have to pay them their wages and all that stuff you don't really want to do when you're a big multinational corporation. You want to hold on to your money. They'll just put it into the computer and the computer will repurpose it and it will think about how it can reposition it culturally to make it more relevant to new markets that you can then sell it into. And what's the net outcome of all of this? Well, it destroys the creative opportunity, right? So actually making cartoons used to be a really creative endeavor and people would love doing that. They'd enjoy doing that. It's vocational. It's fun in a lot of ways. And we're going to now get rid of that. That will all be done in a computer. And your job will be to sell the thing that we've produced. It will keep more money, as I've kind of alluded to already, in the bank account of the multinational corporation and not allow for opportunities for people to earn, right? Really importantly. And this is a big part of the destruction of the economic system in this country and elsewhere that we've seen over the past 30, 40, 50 years have been driven by automation, and AI is accelerating that process. And then importantly, and to come back to what you were just talking about a moment ago, Brian, you're going to destroy the national culture in these countries that you're going into, because what you're saying is you don't need your own culture. We're here, here's some culture. We've repurposed it to an approximation of what we think that you might like, and you can just have that instead. And that goes to break down and homogenize nations, in terms of their cultural differences, to make them easier to lump together into these huge administrative blocks that they're driving it towards. So there's a political and an economic component to that as well.
Indeed. A lot more we could talk about, but we're out of time for today's UK Column News. Lots of questions coming in our chat box to do with NATO, the breakup of NATO, what's happening in Greenland. We'll be back in a few minutes for UK Column Extra, and we'll try and deal with some of those topics. We'll at least discuss and talk through those important topics. But that's it for today's UK Column News. Ben, thank you very much for joining me. Huge thank you to our audience, and an even bigger thank you to everybody supporting UK Column financially, because we are here because of your kindness and generosity. So if you're not a member, do join us. Okay, that's it. We'll be back at the same time, 1 o'clock on Wednesday. Bye-bye.